This game is an example to show that in closed openings, such as the Queen's Gambit accepted, and in pretty much any closed opening that starts with d4, d5, it is sometimes assumed that that you can play slowly, and individual moves and tempi don't matter as much as they would in some really sharp e4, e5 opening, like in King's Gambit or the Evans Gambit. But very often the fight still is taking place for every single square, every single move. And in this game, Garry Kasparov shows very well that just one tempo can play a crucial role in the Queen's Gambit accepted as well. So the game started with d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, c4, and I should mention that this game was played in the clock simul, where Kasparov was facing 6 players from Argentina, and in this game his opponent was a grandmaster. So here black took on c4, and here white has quite a few options. Maybe 10 years ago or maybe 20 years ago, the main line was queen to e2, but starting with this game, Kasparov managed to really popularize bishop to b3 move. It got later picked up by Kramnik, and they both had very good results with this line. Black could exchange on d4 now, or in this game he chose to do this a bit later. So here one thing black could do was take on d4 immediately, and after rook d1 play pawn to e5, and this actually kind of resolves the position quite a bit, as the queens get exchanged. Even though white gets his pawn back, the pressure is a bit off black. Instead he played castle, and now well, he can't go into this line. I actually had this position once in one of my games, and during the game I was absolutely sure that capture with a pawn leads to an isolated pawn position that white should aim for. This is the piece he should, well, this is the correct recapture, because in positions with the isolated pawns, it is imperative for the side with the isolated queen pawn, it is imperative for that side to keep as many pieces on the board as possible. But here Kasparov spotted something else. He spotted that instead it's more important to open up the game as soon as possible, and he took with the knight. And here, well, the threat is pretty obvious to take, and in my game I actually played queen to c7 and went through a difficult position, but ended up not losing the game. So this is probably the better move, though. In the game, black took immediately on d4, which does seem to resolve a bit of attention, until you realize that, well, now d5 is a threat, and that would not be very pleasant for black at all. So black tried to block d5 with a knight, as he normally would in these positions. But after queen to f3, now it turns out that the purpose of exchanging these two knights was that so that the queen can come to this square and put the pressure on the knight. So white wants to just capture on d5 and win the pawn. And black is only 2 moves away from, dealing with all his main problems. If he could just play b6 and queen and bishop to b7 in one go, he would be fine. But he can't, and he has to decide what to do with this knight. If knight goes away, well, then he just lost 2 tempi, and d5 is still going to happen. So he had to take on c3, but that strengthens white's center, and now instead of 1 pawn in the center, white has 2, and now c5, d5 are both up in the air. He should have, you know, still tried to get the bishop out. This is always the problem in this position. This bishop doesn't have time to come out. Instead, he played bishop to d6, assuming he was gaining time, but in reality he wasn't. The threat of a check isn't quite real. I guess he never has time to take on h2. So Kasparov just chased him again with c5, and then the bishop has to go. It has to retreat. Probably too dangerous to take on h2. And now Kasparov just continues to gain, you know, initiative by developing with a gain of time. And now he just improves the position of all the pieces, and now either c6 or d5 are both up in the air. And when the game does open up, black is completely unprepared for it, because while his pieces are still on the back rank, and the black queen is badly placed on the square, and there isn't really a terribly good square for it. So he tried to exchange queens with queen to c6, just walked into d5, has to take. Now the bishop has, well, the queen has to go again. He now could take on b7, but that would not be the best, because that would just, you know, black would kind of get away with, you know, only dropping a pawn on this. So he builds up the tension. Like, that pawn on b7 isn't going away. He still threatens to take, and black doesn't really have a useful move. So he tried to defend it with rook to a7. But now the rook is also becoming a target. And, well, that also hits the bishop, it turns out. So double threat, really. This, and maybe open up the attack against the rook with c5 to c6. So the bishop has to go. Now he attacks the rook. He has to take, and Kasparov doesn't even want to win the exchange by taking, because then the bishop would fall. So he moves the bishop away with a gain of time. And now with g4, again, there's no time for black to defend the rook or to keep attacking the bishop, so he's just going to be down a full rook, basically. So black resigned in this position. A very powerful game from Kasparov, and he, you know, in this game showed that, you know, d4, d5 opening can still be very, very sharp, and the game can open up pretty quick. I noticed the same thing in Kramnik's games. You know, he always plays d4 opening, so knight to f3 most of the time. But if you read his annotations to his games, it always becomes clear that, you know, it's always a fight for, you know, like managing to implement a particular positional idea, or, you know, it always depends on like a single tempo. And here again, the fight for d5 is really what matters. Black doesn't have time to stop it on time, so his position just kind of collapses.